I was asked to share just a couple of experiences and some insights that I received as I took care of my mother for a number of years, and it was long distance. I would fly out to see her and spend a month at a time with her in Ohio as she was diagnosed and struggled with Alzheimer's. And one of the first things that, as her daughter, that was kind of difficult to see, and it was difficult for her to go through, was this idea of losing independence. And that starts with just not being able to drive, having to take a license away and things. That's really tough. But it goes from there to where she can't even start deciding what's best for her to eat for dinner, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and where she needs to be to go to the doctor. And there's this increasing lack of independence, and that's an adjustment. It's an adjustment for her children and grandchildren, and certainly for her. And of course, her feelings were of most concern for us. But at some point, that awareness and that need to feel control diminishes, and it diminishes to the point where it just appears to not even be important to her, because she wasn't aware that these were things she would normally be able to control or could at one time. So there's less frustration and aggravation at not being able to do those things. And then there's kind of like a childlike sweetness that comes up as I would have the opportunity to do things for her. There is a lot of gratitude. Baggage doesn't come up in this stage of the game. They're just grateful, and there's a real sweetness, and I value that. I value that time when she went, that part of her dealing with this. You do get to the point where you're no longer living in the time and place in which you are living. That changes. And I'll give you an example. I was doing her hair one time. I was curling her hair, and I remember she was watching an old episode of The Golden Girls. And she just started talking to me that it didn't make sense to me, the story she was telling, what she thought I should know. And I said, so do you know who I am? And she turned and looked at me, and I still remember her kind of squinting, and then said, well, you're Wanda. Now, Wanda was her best friend for more than 70 years, from the time she was a child. And she was sure I was Wanda doing her hair. And I said, yeah, that's true. That's right. And she said, see, of course I knew that. Of course I knew that. So that brings me to something we learned at that point. Correcting isn't helpful. No good comes out of it. And they're not going to remember that anyway from time to time. It causes confusion and it causes pain. And I'll give you one particularly painful example. When my older sister was with my mother, and I was here in Utah, and my mother said, where's my mom and dad? I haven't seen them. They had been gone for decades. They had passed away. And my sister said, well, Mom, they've passed away. This is her hearing that her parents passed away for the very first time, as far as she's concerned. And she was inconsolable for a while, until she kind of forgot why she was so sad. But that's a pain there's no reason for them to feel or to go through. So we didn't correct from that point on. We knew, and we knew sort of before that too. And so when I did go to visit her a few weeks after that, and we were chatting, and she said, well, where's my mom and dad? So same thing. She's still, where are they? And she'd forgotten the situation a couple of weeks earlier. And I just said, I think they were going on a trip. Weren't they going on a trip? And then they were going to call you when they got back? And she kind of hesitated and said, oh yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's okay. I had to give myself permission to do that, and so did all of my siblings. So anyway, let me see what was next here. Get that up. Okay. So as difficult as all of that was, probably the most difficult experience I had with her was with what is called sundowning. And with sundowning, as it gets later in the day, and it tends to be in the mid to more toward the end stages of dealing with Alzheimer's, you can get aggressive, you can get confused, you can get irritated and frustrated and hallucinate. and it just happens like flipping a switch. And I remember the one particular time when I was talking to her, and she turned and looked at me, and her whole expression had changed. And she said something like, "Who are you?" And I told her who I was, and she said, "You're here to kill me." Now that it just sounds like so ridiculous, but she meant it. And I knew that she had that fear that this person in front of her, me, was there to do her that kind of harm. And I tried to explain to her, "No, I'm your daughter, I love you." And there was a medicine to take as soon as this happened. And so I went and got it. I said, just take this little cup, of the 2 tablespoons of this medicine. And she said, "No, it's poison." And she was confused and aggravated, and it was extremely difficult to have that situation with her. It was just almost traumatic for me, I would say. So I wish I had been a little more prepared for that. I had never heard of it, I wasn't familiar with it, and certainly didn't have any experience with that. So yes, it doesn't hurt to be aware that those kind of things happen. And this is the person that has cared for me my whole life. And it doesn't matter that I became an adult. She still cared for me and loved me and would do anything for me. And now it's that circle of life. It was my turn to return that for her. And it was just a real, I'll just use the word blessing to be able to do that. And I'm grateful I had that experience with her. There are struggles with it, but the memories I have, also sweet experiences, far more make up for it. And I'm glad I had that opportunity with her. So those are just a few of my experiences.
Thank you, Mom. Behind the scenes making of.